And with that, Jessica Jones just got so much more interesting. Hey guys, Kevin Ryan for Jessica Jones, Season 1, Episode 8, aka What Would Jessica Do? And I was definitely looking forward to this episode after the cliffhanger in the last one. Also, of course, we knew that Kilgrave and Jessica were going to be, they were going to meet up in this episode finally, and have that big conversation that we've been waiting for. Even though they did meet up in Episode 7, this was really that episode. And aside from a few scenes, that's exactly what this episode was. It was mainly just Kilgrave and Jessica the entire episode, and I love that. And yes, the scenes without them were great as well, but there was so much we found out in this episode, and I love finding out what we found out in this episode, but let's just get into it, because damn, did things get a lot more interesting and a lot more intense as well, and I don't really know what's going to happen in the next episode, but let's just get into this episode. So I love the way this episode starts. It starts off in this very ambiguous way where you don't really know what's going on. A boy knocks on his sister's room. She won't come out. The parents get ready to leave and tells her to go. And this boy is not just some random boy. This is Jessica's brother, Philip, and along with her parents. Of course, her biological parents. And it's a really powerful scene, because in the present, Jessica remembers this event, and Kilgrave welcomes her home. And you can see that while she's home, she basically is revisiting all of these past events. She hasn't been to this home since the event with her parents, and Jessica says her home never had an armed guard whose name is Hank, and Kilgrave says Hank is only there because he's paid a lot of safety first, and she says she wouldn't have walked in the door if she was going to attack him, and he says he won't mind if Hank searches her, because, Kilgrave doesn't know if Jessica's there to kill him or not, so she says she does mind, and he says he's not going to command it, and he meant it when he said he wanted her to choose, but trust is a two-way street, and he makes Hank search her for drugs or weapons, and Hank searches her and finds a recording on her phone that she made to herself. She was planning on recording Kilgrave to get the confession that he made Hope kill her parents, and I like finding that out, because, of course, we need to know why exactly did Jessica go to meet Kilgrave? Why did she go to do this? Well, it was for Hope, obviously, who's not in this episode, by the way. A large majority of the characters are in this episode. Hope's not here. Luke's not here. Aside from a few scenes, Jerry's barely in this episode, aside from a few scenes, as is Trish. Like I said, it mainly was Jessica and Kilgrave the entire episode, and I really love that. So basically, he says he doesn't like to be recorded. He asks if she came here for a confession, and she says she came there to end the collateral damage he's been piling up around her, and the confession was a last ditch. She wanted to make it seem like it was that, but really it was just to end things. She's hoping that she can just close things out. She's been trying to get away from Kilgrave all season long, and she really wanted this to be the end of it. However, what happens in this episode, there's no way this is the end of it. There's absolutely no way. And he says he knows it wasn't out of love. He's not delusional, just optimistic. And he says he'll show her around, and she says she chooses that he don't ever touch her. And he says he won't without her genuine consent. And there's a reason why she says that. We'll get into why. But she looks around the room and sees her growth chart, which Kilgrave says is a time-honored tradition by families everywhere except by his. And she sees old family pictures and notices that Kilgrave has gone all out to get the exact same furniture she used to have as a young girl. I mean, he basically has recreated her entire house just how it looked, and it's pretty crazy and pretty creepy. By the way, David Tennant killed this entire episode, let me just say that. So he says he found the realtor who sold the place after her parents died, and she says he shouldn't have. He says he wanted to when they were together. He asked what her happiest memories were, and she said home. He then introduces her to staff, and she says she will not live in a house with slaves, and he says that she's being sanctimonious, and he makes the staff admit they're happy with their salary, which they agree. They are, and those two people are Laurent and Alva. Laurent even had a drinking problem, and Kilgrave says they give people a second chance. He tells them to leave, and Jessica says that she's tired, and he shows her and Hank to her old bedroom. She apparently had a shared bedroom, and he almost goes into her little brother Philip's room, but she stops him, and Kilgrave says he can relate to her hard feelings. He then goes into her old bedroom, which is just the way she left it, with a Nirvana poster and everything, and he says he worked hard on it, used a magnifying glass on a picture of her room to ID the CDs. She sees her binoculars, which is right where she left them. I mean, he really went all out, and it's pretty crazy the way he recreated her entire room. And she sees the CDs. It's crazy. He says he wants more appreciation, wants her to think back to when she was 14 years old, peeping in on the neighbors. He says it's nothing to be ashamed of. Everyone wants to see what goes on behind closed doors. Trish then calls Kilgrave, who refers to as Patsy, and tells Jessica to answer since she's not his prisoner. Now, he has her phone the entire time, and that's what's pretty crazy. But what you really see in this episode, that Kilgrave doesn't necessarily think he's doing anything wrong. You really see that here. So Trish asks what the hell's going on since she's not in jail, and Jessica says that she's there, and she tells her Kilgrave showed up at the station, and Trish asks if anyone was hurt. Jessica says no, but she had to get out of there, and she left the city as fast as she could, and admits that she could have called, and Kilgrave asks if she wants to invite Trish over, and Trish asks how she knows that this is not like the last time when Kilgrave had her acting like everything is fine, and it wasn't. And Jessica says that it's because Kilgrave is a psychotic, repulsive waste of a human being, and if she were under his control, he never let her say that, which obviously he is. And Trish says that she'll need money. She says she's covered, and she tells Trish to let her do this, and she tells her everyone is disappearing, and tells her that Will is gone. He put in a leave of absence at work, and then flat out disappeared. So she's worried that Kilgrave has him, and Jessica says that he'll show up, and she says she'll be in touch. Trish says she's tired of missing her. She says she has to go and hangs up. She gives Kilgrave back the phone. He gives Jessica a present and says Laurent and whatever her name is are cooking, and she's welcome to come. Let me just say, Kilgrave is so darkly humorous this whole episode. Like, the thing with Kilgrave is that you don't know if you want to laugh at what he says, but it's just so funny you can't help but laugh. I mean, what Kilgrave is saying, it shouldn't be funny, but it is, and I think David Tennant did a very good job with portraying Kilgrave. Just this dark humor that he has is really great, and a lot of people are saying that there's a lot of Doctor essence in Kilgrave, and I definitely do see that. I mean, the way that the Doctor's humor is. Now, I never saw David Tennant on Doctor Who, so I can't really say, yeah, he's acting like the Doctor. But what I've seen on Doctor Who is very much like Kilgrave in this episode. It's very darkly humorous, and very interesting the way we saw that. Also, a lot of people said there were a lot of Hannibal references here. I definitely see a Hannibal Will situation with Kilgrave and Jessica. No matter what happens, they just can't get away from each other. I definitely saw that this entire episode, and I'll get into that. So basically, Kilgrave says that when as well as to be expected, she opens the gift, and Kilgrave got her. It's a new dress. She tears it up and sits on the bed. Now, this is Jessica we're talking about. She's not going to wear a dress. She does not wear dresses. She goes to sleep, and Kilgrave and his staff wait for Jessica to wake up, and he asks how they live like this day after day, just hoping people are going to do what they want. He finds it's unbearable. She finally wakes up, and he asks why she's not in the dress. She says purple is not her color. She sits down to eat and drinks wine, and she asks Hank if Hank will always be watching, and Kilgrave agrees and dismisses him. About that, guys, I got a phone call, and I had to stop the review, but let's get back into the review. Because I want to talk about, obviously, what was going on. So, where I was, basically, he tells her that dinner's ready. He says he had the chef prepare her favorite meal, which is pasta amatriciana, and Jessica says that's his favorite meal, and it makes her nauseous. She tells him she will be having a liquid dinner, meaning wine, and she asks for another bottle. He says she drinks too much, and she says it's the only way she gets through her goddamn days after what he did to her, and he asks if she blames him for her drinking problem, and she says that it's the truth, and he tells her it wasn't all bad but ended roughly, and she says he called her murdering a woman ending roughly, and he says to be clear he did not tell her to kill Riva, and he says if she remembers he said take care of her, not kill her. She chose to punch her, and she tells him he's a son of a bitch, throws the bottle, and I mean, she's having to face a lot of things that she didn't want to have to face before. This is a great example of that. Laurent and Alva come out with razors to their throats. Kilgrave is controlling them, and she says that she knew he had a safeguard in place. He says he didn't see it coming, one of the many reasons he likes her, and she says he said he wasn't going to use his powers, and he says he only meant to not control her, and he tells them they can stop her, and tells Jessica they are in place until they build some trust, and Jessica says it's until she chooses him, and he tells Laurent and Alva to clean up the mess, and she says she's full and tired, and tells the staff she's sorry. She then notices something in her room, and Will attacks her, and she asks what the hell he's doing. Now, Will in this episode, I think, becomes a lot more interesting. I really liked Will as a character here. I know some people are thinking, oh, he's not that great of a character. I will agree he's not the best character on the show, but they at least made him more interesting here, and I liked what they did with him in this episode, definitely. I thought he was definitely very interesting. Because as we know, Trish specifically told him to not go after Kilgrave, which he is anyway. He's totally going after Kilgrave, and basically, basically he asks her if, you know, she's under his control, and Kilgrave in the meantime is asking if everything's okay. She says she tripped and she's drunk and to stay out of her shit. She tells Will she was under his goddamn control, she would have given him up, and he needs to get out of there, and he says she has to come with him. He put a bomb in the basement to kill Kilgrave downstairs, and she says he can't kill him with Hope still in jail, and he says she can't let him live, he's too dangerous, and she says there are innocent people living in the house, and she's to be handling it, because obviously she needs to get Hope out of jail because she wants to clear her name. Hope was under Kilgrave's control, that's why she killed her parents, and she needs to let the police know that. So she's handling too, if he kills him, he kills her, and she will haunt him for the rest of his life. She takes his phone, and she says she is there because she has to be, because she wants to be, and he has to leave now. Kilgrave knocks on the door, and she answers. He says he hopes everything's alright. She tells him there's a bomb in the base. She literally tells him there's a bomb in the basement. She obviously doesn't want him to die. And to get Hank, who shows them both the bomb, and explains to them that it's a remote detonation. A small charge hits the gas main, and the whole house goes up, and Kilgrave asks if he can dismantle it, and he says somebody really has it out for him. He says whoever got past the security and says to fire them. Kilgrave says she knew was here, and he thinks it's Will, and, you know, he knows that it's Will. She says he's killed more people as an afterthought and used his powers to compel murder, and he says what matters is she saved his life and does care for her, and she says she just can't handle another death on her conscience, even if it's his, and he would know if he had one. He says he has a conscience, it's just more selective. He cares if she dies, the rest are fungible, and tells her he will see her in the morning, which Jessica just got on recording, and throughout this episode she does that several times. That happens. Then we get to the one scene that I just don't care about. I don't care about Wendy, Jerry, and Pam. I still don't care. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't care. Even though it was the best episode of the season, I just don't really care here. I did really like this scene, though. I will definitely say that. Wendy and Jerry with their lawyers. Jerry's lawyer, Desmond, says that Wendy's request for 70% of Jerry's holdings is ridiculous. He says she can't be serious, and she says to Jerry to tell Desmond how serious she is, or does she want to send her private eye to threaten him again? She says she sent no one. She fell in love with someone else. It doesn't make her a monster. And Wendy says the word she used is bastard. And Wendy says even when they were dating, everyone wanted to know what she saw in her. Jerry asks why she married her then, and she says it was because she was kind to her. She was a bastard to everyone else, but kind to her. And I like that we're finding out what's going on between these two. I mean, clearly they had a connection, and now they just don't. And Wendy doesn't understand why Jerry would leave her. I mean, she doesn't understand that. So Wendy agrees it's too late. The lawyers go back and forth. Wendy says she built everything around her. Now she's not there. Jerry has Pam, and she has nothing, and now is in the middle of a midlife crisis. And Jerry says she's sorry. Wendy says she's going to have to ask her to say it with cash. And Pam tells Jerry there's a text for her. Wendy makes fun of the fact that she calls her by her last name. Jerry says she needs to take this. Pam tells her it's about Jessica. She asks if she dug something up on Wendy. Pam tells her it's a message. She's with Kilgrave. And basically, I really like the scene here because, like I said, it's really showing what Wendy went through with Jerry, and I think it makes us kind of care about her more. So Will's with a bunch of guys. Now, this is very interesting. We don't know who these guys are. Trish then approaches him. He tells them to go away and kisses her. He asks if everything's all right. And, of course, the guys have no idea who she is, but they go away anyway. And she asks who these guys are, and he says they're a couple of his boys from back in the day. Asks what's up. She says the last time that they talked, he was going to go after a homicidal mind controller maniac, and she's heard nothing since. And she says she's not wrong to be concerned. He says he knows it's just he lost him, so he came home. And he says Kilgrave is gone and out of the city, and she asks how he knows that if he lost him, and he says they're free of him now, they can be together. She says Jessica is still on the run for him, and she can't come back until he's caught. It's up to them now to do that. He says it's not because Jessica can take care of herself a lot better than they can, and Trish says she doubts it. He says everyone wants to be the hero, but now he sees that they can't be because they're just not as powerful as Jessica or Kilgrave, and he's okay with that, but he tells her she can't always help not without getting hurt, and I like that he's telling her, look, I know you want to get involved, but you can't always get involved. I mean, we've seen all season that Trish wants to get involved, and I like that Will's telling her you can't do that. So he's saying this like it's about her, but it's about him, and she says he's abandoning Jessica, and he says he's getting out of the way, and both of them should do that to step back. She tells him to get back to his boys, and she doesn't want to talk to him. She's not very happy with Will right now. So definitely their relationship is a bit on the rocks, and I actually really do care about these two. I know a lot of people don't, but I actually really do care, because it really does go with the idea of her wanting to help Jessica, but of course, I like that Will saying you can't do that. So Jessica then lies on her bed and she sees her mom telling her to get up, and her dad said the vacation awaits, and then sees Philip and he tells him to go, and her mother tries to defend her, and Philip says they'd be alive if it wasn't for her, and her parents agree, and she wakes up from the nightmare. She looks in the window with her binoculars, sees a gardener watering flowers, thinks about what her nightmare said to make it right. She goes to Kilgrave outside, and he says he was waiting to see what Jessica he's going to get, and she recalls how she used to eat breakfast there as a kid. He asks if she's trying to make an effort, and she says she's making a shit situation tolerable, and I thought that was kind of a funny scene. But just seeing what Jessica had to go through. Now, what her brother says to her is very interesting. You know, the last words he says, that she can make it right, and they're served breakfast, and she asks him if his actions haunt him, and he says he rarely dwells on anything, and she asks about Hope's family, and this is really when the episode gets great. Like, it was already a really great episode, but this is really where it got really interesting. She says he never talked to her about his parents, and she asks why that is, and he says he'd rather not relive it, and she asks if killing Hope's parents was all about them, and he says it was all about her. He was mad at her for not saving him, and a neighbor sees her, Elizabeth, and she hugs her and can't believe how adult she is. She thinks Kilgrave is her husband, but Jessica quickly shuts that down. She starts to tell stories about Jessica, but Jessica says they don't have the time. However, Kilgrave wants to hear and tells her to join them, and then she says her mother, Alyssa, was a math teacher but couldn't cook for her life. She says Brian and Alyssa would fight like cats and dogs, but Jessica says it's not true. Elizabeth says she knows they loved each other, but everyone has their trouble. She then tells Kilgrave about Jessica was always a tomboy all her life. You know, she wore princess dresses with high tops. I mean, she clearly was never much of a girly girl, and she remembers how witty Jessica can be. Recalls the time when she duct taped Philip to a tree, but she doesn't blame because he was such a juvenile delinquent. And Jessica says he was a great kid, and she says the timing was awful. Jessica tells her to stop. Elizabeth says she knew something terrible was going to happen. Not a day goes by that she doesn't regret not warning her, and she has no idea what a burden she's had to live through after all these years. Kilgrave asks if she really knew something terrible was going to happen, and she says she didn't. He asks why she would say such a horrible thing. She says it makes her feel important, and this is very interesting what she said. She says it makes her feel important, and he says it's a shitty thing to do. He asks what she would want to do if someone said that to her, and she says she'd want to slap them. He tells her to leave, and you do see that Kilgrave still kind of has people under his control. I mean, even though, obviously, you know, he doesn't necessarily have Elizabeth under his control. It very much felt that way. Like, it definitely felt like he had this power over her. It was a very creepy scene. I really like seeing that. I mean, every Kilgrave scene has some very creepy undertones, and I really like that. So after she leaves, he tells Jessica that it had to be a bit satisfying. She agrees. He tries to get closer. She tells him to not touch her and get up because, you know, she specifically told him not to. And then we find out really what's going on between Jessica and Kilgrave. And this was a great reveal. They really handled it well. And like I said, she has to deal with a lot of things she didn't want to deal with before. He says they used to do a lot more than just touch hands. She says it's called rape. And yes, we find out in this episode that Kilgrave raped her, and he doesn't see it that way. He doesn't see it as rape. He sees it as she wanted, but she said that she never wanted. It was never consensual, and it's very interesting what we saw there. He says he has to painstakingly choose every word he says, and he once told a man to go screw himself. He didn't have a home or loving parents or family. She says if he blames bad parenting, her parents died and she hasn't raped anyone, and that's true, but she says to admit his parents had nothing to do with why he forced her, and he asks if he wants her to see what they put him through, and he takes out a flash drive that she hasn't seen since she killed Riva, and he shows her files, which has his childhood on it, and it's clearly something she didn't know about him. I think this really goes with the idea that Jessica really didn't know who Kilgrave was, and this is very interesting. He's hooked up to a machine in his house, and we find out that Kilgrave's real name is Kevin, and his parents were scientists that wanted to turn him into a freak, and he says he has to go through neurological exams for fluoroscopy, brain biopsy, cerebral spinal fluid extractions, and on the video, his mom injects him with a needle into his spine. She says while her dad played with her on the front lawn, his dad prepped him for his 4th electric surgery. He makes him get away and asks him what's going on. Kilgrave then shuts off the tape. He says like her, this power was forced upon him, and he thought she would understand. And we see that she literally recorded the entire conversation on her phone, and she saves it, and you know she's going to use that as leverage at some point. So she goes to see him and she realizes that he wanted the flash drive from Maria because it was the only evidence left of how he was made. And she says no one knows he exists except for his parents and if they were still alive. And he says they were young and ran away from their careers and from him. She says all the shit he does is because no one has taught him how to be good. And he says he hopes she's not laughing at him. She says she's just thinking, and she tells him that they should go for a ride. And I mean, let's face it, they actually got me to feel bad for Kilgrave. They actually did it. I didn't think it was possible, but you know what? I actually felt bad for Kilgrave here because even though this is Kilgrave, no one should ever have to go through something like that. I mean, that's just, it's tragic. No one should ever have to go through their parents not loving them. It's a very hard thing to do, and you can definitely see why Kilgrave is the way he is, sort of. I'm not justifying what he's doing. I'm just saying I kind of understood Kilgrave better in this episode, and I definitely like seeing that. So she tells him they should go for a ride. He asks she has a destination in mind. She says she does, says it should take 2 hours, and tells Alvin LeBron if he's not back in 2 hours to remove the skin from each other's faces. And they go to the man that was I found that darkly humorous. They then go to the man that was holding his family hostage. Now, they kept showing this on the news, on the TV, in the episode, and I knew that this was going to be someone important, and he realizes that she wants him to perform a heroic act, and he says he doesn't want to do this, or the attention it will bring. She says he can do this, or be a chicken shit. Either way, she's going in, and I like how she tried to get him to be a hero. This is very interesting. A cop tries to stop them from coming into the house, but Kilgrave gets him to let them through, and she takes the bar off the door. They go into the house. Chuck almost shoots, but Kilgrave stops him. And Jessica asks Chuck's wife if she can walk, and she says the police will help her. She thanks them. He says to not let anyone know they were there, and she tells them to go. Kilgrave then tells Chuck to put the barrel of the gun to his mouth, and she says he can't kill him, and he says he can't kill himself. He will never be a productive member of society, and she says it's not for him to decide, and he says he will go to prison and pay off taxpayers. She says he's never paid a tax in his life. He asks what would Jessica do, and that's where the that's where the title of the episode comes from. She says she wants him to turn himself in, and Kilgrave makes him do that. He says that was a waste of energy. She tells him he just saved 4 lives, and when they come back, he feels more accomplished than ever because he's never used his powers for good, and he asks if that's how she does it, or was it about balancing the scales so that survivor's guilt can carry around, and she says that's not how it works. He says she's so outraged all the people he's affected, and he asks how many more lives she thinks he'd have to save to get back to 0. She says saving someone doesn't mean killing someone else, and he says they should do this more often, and I think of all the people they could save and the crimes they could stop, and thinks they could be a great dynamic duo, and she says he doesn't need her to do that, and he says he told the man to kill himself, and he can't be a hero without her. She agrees, says she needs to think, and he says he thought this is what she wanted. She says this is just a walk, and he says he doesn't think Alva LeBron could survive the letdown if she didn't come back, and she says she came by her own free will and to trust that she will come back, and then we get another devastating scene. I mean, you thought that the flashback with Kilgrave was devastating. This is even more devastating. We see a flashback to Jessica with Philip. She's playing with his Game Boy. They get into a fight. Brian tries to break it up. They hit an oncoming truck, and that's how her parents and brother died, and that's pretty much why she blames herself for her parents' death. That's why she blames herself for this. So you can kind of understand why. I mean, she was just in a fight with her brother. It wasn't anything that big of a deal, and I like finding out there really wasn't anything that big. So in the present, Jessica goes to see Trish, who hugs her. She asks if she left, and she tells him that she found Kilgrave and has been living with him for a couple of days. She lets her know she left of her own will, and I like that we got the scene between Trish and Jessica, because they need to get back on the same page. Trish needs to know what's going on, and I like what she asked Trish. She asked Trish if she could, harness Kilgrave's powers for good, would she do that? And Trish says that she can. He's a psychopath, and the amount of meds it would take would be staggering. And she asked what if she could show him how to use his powers in a positive way. She asked how she'd do that, and she says she'd have to stay with him, giving up her life, living with him, and be with him, point him in the right direction. And there's none, but what if she could what would she do? And she says she doesn't know. She says she's not the best one for the job, but she's the only one, but maybe it's a way to make it right. And she's thinking that she actually could help him, that she actually could do this, and she actually could make him a better person, which I like that Jessica kind of thought of the possibilities here, because yeah, it's not impossible to help him out. It has to be possible. So Jerry then sees an email from Wendy, thinks about what to do. She texts Jessica, tells her she needs information on Wendy, and basically Laurent, Alvin, Kilgrave wait for Jessica to return. Kilgrave's forcing them to leave their eyes open so he knows when she's back again, basically controlling them. And Kilgrave sees the text from Jerry, has no idea what she's talking about. Jerry tells her to cut the shit, she needs some leverage on Wendy before she ruins everything and nothing else matters. He responds to Jessica would, and I thought that was really funny that he was just responding to Jessica's texts in that way he did. Laurent tells Kilgrave Jessica's returned. He says he needs stuff up and she has brought him Chinese food. He asks why she came back and she says he was right about them. Maybe they can balance the scales of it, but if it doesn't work, she's out of there. And she tells him the first step in heroism is to not be a prick. She gets him to eat, spills food on herself. Alvin and Laurent then pass out. She basically stabs Kilgrave with a needle and tells him this is what she would do. She takes his laptop and then kidnaps him. And basically, I think she is going to try to help him out, but clearly she has more of a plan than what we think she does. I mean, we don't know what her and Trish agreed to, so we'll have to see what happens with that in the next episode. Then the ending of this episode is truly insane. Hank tries to stop her, but then it's them shot by Will, tells him to let her finish, and she says she can. He says she's already done the hard part, let her death be on him, and she says she can't let him kill her, and then she goes up and flies, which all of his guys are surprised about. Elizabeth then shows up with a bag, which has a bomb in it, and he tells them to run. Their car blows up, they get away, but Hank's dead body is still there, and Will has been stabbed, and that's how the episode ends. So Elizabeth was clearly under Kilgrave's control. I don't know how, but clearly she was trying to help him out. I don't know in what sort of capacity, but she was, and that part I think is very interesting. And then we get to this whole situation of what's going on with Jessica. Is she really going to help out Kilgrave? Is she really going to harness his powers for good? It seems like something that she does want to do. I do think that Jessica's interested in helping out Kilgrave and does want to make his powers, does want to show there is still some good in him. But is she serious about it? Is she serious? Is she just, saying it because she wants to feel better about it? I'm not really sure. I mean, I think the main reason she came to this house was for catharsis, but clearly there's more to it than just catharsis. She does want to help out Kilgrave. She is going to torture him, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. That definitely is going to be interesting. Is there good still in Kilgrave? I'm not really sure. I mean, is it possible for there to be good in Kilgrave? We'll have to see what happens with that. That definitely is going to be interesting because it is a big question. Could Kilgrave still have some good in him? We just don't know. And I think Jessica is just as lost as we are. We don't really know if there is good in him. Will and Trish really seems like stuff is on the rocks with them. What's going to happen to Will? Obviously, Trish is going to freak out that he's injured. We'll have to see what happens with that. I definitely feel like Will is hiding a lot of things that Trish just doesn't know about. Who are these group of guys that he's with? What did they do? We don't know. We'll have to figure out what's going on with that. That definitely is going to be interesting to find out. I love finding out what happened to Jessica. What happened to Kilgrave is definitely very interesting. We'll have to see what happens with that. I mean, it's really crazy what he had to go through. And you are starting to understand why Kilgrave became the man he was. I'm not justifying what he's doing, but what's going to happen with Wendy? Obviously, Jerry wants to get some leverage on Wendy. She wants information on her. She wants to use what she's doing against her. So we'll have to see what happens with that. That definitely is going to be interesting to see what happens there. But overall, guys, an absolutely amazing episode. I loved every minute of it. I can't wait for the next episode. Definitely best episode of the season. I loved it. Sorry that I had to take a call in the middle of this video. But let me know what you guys saw this episode. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for the originals. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.